Thinking of saving up money is simple, right? The problem then is actually doing it and seeing the money grow in your bank account. In one of my previous videos, I shared with you how I managed to save up $6,000 starting from literally $0 in my brand new bank account. If you want to know the strategies that I used, I will leave the video up here or in the description below so you can go and have a look. This amount might not seem a lot for many people, but it was a lot of money for me. I arrived in New Zealand in mid-July of 2022 and I decided to open a new bank account as soon as I got to Auckland. Of course, I needed it for working purposes, but also I didn't want to spend the money that I had saved up in my bank account in my home country to live and travel here in New Zealand. So today I'm gonna share with you more strategies that I use to save up money while traveling here in New Zealand, which is one of the most expensive countries in the world. The first step is to have a vision, a goal. And no, I'm not talking about a money-related goal. So I'm not talking about having $100,000 in your bank account. I mean, of course, yes, that would be great, amazing, I would love that. But that wouldn't motivate me to save up money, and I'm sure it wouldn't motivate you either. You need to set a goal that drives you, something that motivates you to save up. My personal goal was to be able to take a month off work, to be able to travel around New Zealand, and to start saving up for a trip that my sister and I are planning together. This is what has been driving me to save up money. So, what is your why? What is the big dream that you have this year? That thing that you wish you had the money for? Stop the video, write it down. You've done it? Okay, great. Now keep that always in front of you. The second step is to be able to save up money effectively. To do so, we need to create a budget. But before getting into it, you need to know in which areas you're spending the most money on. If you have never tracked your expenses before, this is where you have to start. As we cannot create a budget if we don't know where our money is going. And it's also more difficult to save up money. And of course, this doesn't have to be a complicated Excel sheet. I stand for minimalism and simplicity. And you can do this on your phone, you can write them in the notes using some apps, or you can simply write it on paper. My personal way of doing it is writing all of my expenses into my bullet journal, but also on my wallet app, which is a mobile app. You just have to find the way that works for you, which technique you prefer, and stick to it. So now let's talk about creating a budget. When creating a budget, we first have to start from our basic needs, which are shelter, food, and medications. Our next focus will be to try to cut down as much as possible all of those expenses that are not basic needs. For example, shopping, eating out, and transportation, especially if you're someone that uses Uber a lot instead of walking to school or to work, when it's not really necessary. When creating a budget, I always choose an amount and try to stick to it as much as possible. As I have been traveling a lot, having a light luggage for me is a priority. So I don't usually go shopping that much because I don't want to put more stuff into my luggage. I want to keep it light. But of course, eating out is way easier than cooking at home. So what I do for it is to choose an amount of money that I will spend on it and I will not exceed it. Let's take $150 for example, which of course, depending on your lifestyle, it could be a big amount or a small amount. But let's just stick to it as an example. Of course, we all want to have a social life, and usually what we do is going out for lunch or dinner with our friends. What I try to do instead is to go out for a coffee or an ice cream. That way I still have a social life, but I will not spend so much money on it. Before going on, I would like to talk about debit and credit cards for a minute. Have you noticed that when we use a card, we tend to spend more money? This is because credit cards are designed to make us spend more. With a simple tap, in just a few seconds, the transaction is done. And that it's great, right? It saves a lot of time. But at the same time, it also creates a lot of distance between the user and the money. While when using cash, you actually see the money leaving your wallet, and the wallet being lighter and emptier. If you are struggling with saving up money and spending less, I highly suggest you to switch back to cash for a while and see how that goes. The following step is cutting down on the biggest expenses, and the biggest one usually is rent. So when moving abroad, I always try to find the cheapest option, but of course you always have to find a compromise. Because, for example, renting a room, of course, is way cheaper than renting an apartment. But at the same time, I wouldn't rent a room that is very far away from the place where I work, because then I would have to spend money on transportation, and that wouldn't make sense. Sometimes it could end up being way more expensive than renting a room in the city center. But of course, that all depends on your necessities, so you always have to find the option that works best for you. Now, I would like to share with you an overview of my expenses of December and January, so that you can see the strategies that I used to cut down on those big expenses. So in December, I spent $632.99. If we go and have a look closer, we can see that my major expenses that month was food, like grocery shopping. I spent $210, and that is because I was working 4 days a week instead of 5, and of course there was Christmas, so I bought more chocolate and things like that. My second biggest expenses, it was public transportation, which was $187.99. This is because I was living outside of the city and I had to catch the bus to go to work. As rent, I spent $140, which was an Airbnb for the first 2 weeks when I moved here in Wellington. If you've watched my previous videos and shorts, you know that my favorite way of saving up on rent is with house sitting. If you have never heard of this, this is how it works. There are some pet owners that for any reason they need to travel either for work or maybe they just want to go on holiday, and they need someone to look after their house and their pets. So they start looking for a house sitter, and there are different websites where you can find this. So what happens is that you get to stay there for free. It could be for a long period of time or for a short period of time, depending on the situation. But with this strategy, I managed to save up 75% of my salary in the month of December, and I think that's just incredible. And this is a video of me and Loki. This is the house where I stayed for 6 weeks. Isn't it beautiful? The month of January, on the other hand, is completely different. You can see here that in my biggest expenses this month is a rent, which is over $1,000. But you have to keep in mind that $700 is the bond for the room, which is pretty high, but at the same time I will get that back once I leave the room. So I left Loki and that beautiful house on the 23rd of January because the owners came back. It was great because the guy that is renting me the room wanted to go on holiday back to his home country for 6 weeks, and those were exactly the weeks that I needed. And he gave it to me for a very cheap price of $190 per week. So now I'm living in the city. I don't need to buy any public transportation tickets because everything is to a walkable distance. I can go to work walking and also to do grocery shopping. So my second biggest expenses was grocery, which is $170.73. And this month I managed to save up 45% of my salary. As you can see, each month for me is very different as I'm traveling, and my needs and routines change from place to place. But what I always try to do is to save up at least 30% of my salary, and if it's more, way better, because I know that of course there will be moments in which I will be just traveling and not working. So this is how I'm saving up money while living and traveling in New Zealand. I really hope these strategies helped you out in some way and gave you some ideas of things that you can do as well. I really hope you found this video useful. If so, please leave a thumbs up. And of course, if you have any questions or you have other strategies that you usually use, please write them down in the comments below so we can all learn from it. And I see you in the next one. Bye!